Morning, everyone. Last week's job report was more of the same. Slow growth, modest job gains, stagnant wages, and millions of Americans who remain out of work. The Obama administration predicted that the unemployment rate would be 5% today if the Congress enacted their stimulus bill. Well, we're at 7.6%, and I think we can certainly do better. Republicans have a plan for robust economic job growth in our country. As part of our jobs plan, Republicans have passed a bill to fix the student loan program and stop rates from doubling, making it easier for students and their families to make their payments and afford college. It actually mirrors a plan proposed in the President's budget, but the Democrat-controlled Senate has refused to pass it or any bill, for that matter, to solve the problem. So I'm now concerned that the President and his party have decided to deliberately allow rates to rise on students and families after July the 1st. Instead of engaging with the House and Senate Republicans to enact a student loan fix that we all agree is needed, they seem to be intent on picking a fake fight to create some kind of a distraction. They hope this fake fight will mask the divisions within their own party that's blocking enactment of a solution. The consequences of this cynical political strategy are real. It could lead to rates rising on students and families on July the 1st, at a time when they can least afford it. This poster highlights how the President and his party are picking this fight. On April the 10th, the President releases a budget that calls for a change to a market-based interest rate for student loans. On May 9th, Chairman Klein introduced the Smarter Solutions for Students Act, a plan similar to what was outlined in the President's budget. On May 22nd, as Republicans prepare to pass Chairman Klein's bill, mirroring what the President's called for, the White House decides to issue a veto threat. And today, after the House has acted, the Senate still has not passed a bill to deal with this problem. The simple truth is the President has run into a roadblock, and that roadblock is his own party over in the Senate. He can't get the Senate to pass his bill, so the White House has resorted to picking this fight to try to mask the divisions within their own party. So we need the President to show the courage and the leadership to help bring them along and resolve this issue. Republicans have acted. We've done our job. It's time for the President and his party to do their job.
Mr. Speaker, next week the House will take up an issue, the issue of abortion, and it stands as of now no chance of passing in the Senate. Do you think that you guys should be spending so much time on these issues that have no chance of going any further?
Listen, jobs continues to be our #1 concern. And while we continue to be focused on this, there are other important issues that we have to deal with. And after the Kermit Gosnell case and the publicity that it received, I think the legislation is appropriate, and I hope those who have voted against such proposals in the past will change their minds.
Speaker Boehner, after that bipartisan meeting that you guys had with NSA officials, that briefing, some members of your own party and even Democrats were saying we should relook at Section 215 of the Patriot Act. Would you be in favor of relooking at that? Would you allow for that type of legislation to go on the House floor?
I think both the Judiciary Committee and the Intelligence Committees are continuing to provide oversight on this issue. And I frankly would look to them. I'm not familiar with Section 215, but there's been a lot of oversight over these programs, and I expect it will continue.
How did your meeting go yesterday with the Sandy Hook families, and did you give them any sort of assurances that the House will act on significant reforms this year?
Well, our hearts go out to these families and the victims of this horrible tragedy and others like it. We did have a nice meeting with the Sandy Hook families yesterday, Mr. Cantor and I, and Mr. Gowdy came on behalf of Chairman Goodlatte. But it was a good meeting, but it was a private meeting, and I'll leave it at that.
Did it leave you with any new thoughts about ways to tackle the nation's gun problems?
Chairman Goodlatte and his committee have continued to look at the existing laws and how they can be improved. Tim Murphy, our colleague from Pennsylvania, has done an awful lot of work over at the Energy and Commerce Committee looking at the issue of mental health and how that would play into this. And I'm hopeful that they'll continue their work.
General Alexander is here on the House side this morning and is going over to the Senate here in just a little bit here. He's talked a lot about possibly declassifying parts of this program. Isn't that, though, the concern? Why was this important to be classified before, and now because the public and, frankly, many lawmakers don't understand the program, why would it be okay to declassify parts now when it was so important to keep this under wraps previously?
Well, as you know, there are standards and procedures about what's classified and what isn't. And there's always a continuing debate between the Congress and the administration about whether those standards are being applied evenly. We also know that many times things that were once classified have been declassified, either at the request of the White House or at the request of the Congress. And so this debate about whether it's classified or should have been or maybe not in the future really isn't any different than what we see on a lot of different programs at a lot of different agencies.
But isn't this rise to a higher level because you have the public engaged on this issue because they think the government has this wide dragnet out that's picking up every single phone call?
I've made it very clear. This program does not target innocent Americans in any way, shape, or form. These programs have helped keep America safe. They've enhanced our ability to go after terrorists who want to bring harm to the American people. And frankly, I'm a little surprised that the White House hasn't stood up and made clear on an ongoing basis over this last week just how important these programs are. For those of us who have been briefed on these programs, who are aware of these programs, we're aware how much safety they've brought us. And we're also aware of many examples where they've helped us eliminate terrorist threats.
Mr. Speaker, can you clarify your feelings about following the so-called Hastert rule and sort of clarify the extent of your willingness to bring bills to the floor that may not have the majority in favor?
My goal is always to bring bills to the floor that have a strong Republican majority. And you know, whether we're talking about the Farm Bill, you know, there are parts of the Farm Bill I hope are improved on the floor of the House through an open process. But I do expect that we'll have a majority of Republicans voting for the Farm Bill. Immigration reform, it's a very difficult issue. But I don't intend to bring an immigration bill to the floor that violates what I and what my members of my party, what our principles are. And so I continue to believe that you'll see strong bipartisan majorities for bills that we bring to the floor. Thanks, everybody.
Will you answer a question about the Frederick Douglass statue and why you haven't invited D.C. residents?
Good morning. This morning on the floor, we were observing that tomorrow marks the 6-month anniversary since the Newtown tragedy. Floor speeches, conference calls, visits from the families, that has been taking up some of our time, all in the hope of bipartisan legislation for gun violence prevention, manifested in legislation for background checks. That's very sad. To some of us, the role of government is about doing things for the American people to help them reach their fulfillment. It's been nearly 6 months, certainly over 5.5, since Congress has been in session for this Congress and still no jobs bill. I believe we almost have a moral responsibility to have policy to create jobs, whether it's to incentivize the private sector, to make sure that our children are educated, our neighborhoods are safe from crime, and our first responders have the resources they need to protect the American people, to protect and defend. It's our first responsibility, but not one single jobs bill. Nearly 6 months. Now it's over 2 months since we've had the opportunity to go to conference for a budget that would create jobs, which would grow the economy, which would reduce the deficit, and to do so in a timely fashion. Republicans asked for regular order, which means they wanted to go to conference until it was time to go to conference. So I called once again upon my colleagues to allow us to appoint conferees to go to conference again to grow our economy. At the same time now, on this clock that is ticking, in 18 days, interest on student loans will double. It's shameful, putting college out of reach for millions of American families and children. If Republicans had their way, it would even worse than double with the legislation that they passed on for. It would more than double. So we, again, have a critical responsibility to keep America competitive. Innovation, education, job creation, keep us number one, and without the investments in education, making it affordable for more families, children cannot reach their fulfillment. America cannot be as preeminent as the vows of our founders would require us to be by creating jobs here in America which contribute to innovation. It's not just in the classroom, it's in job creation in the U.S. that innovation springs from. Again, we have to go to that budget table. Instead, we are in a world of subterfuge, smokescreen. Any subject that you want to talk about, just pick one out of the air. And yesterday was really just another day in the life of the Republican Congress. They passed legislation that was disrespectful of the rights, health, and safety of the American women. All the people who voted for the bill were men. Disrespectful. Yet another. This is a week. This Monday marked the 50th anniversary of President Kennedy signing the Equal Pay Act. With great enthusiasm, remembered that day. We used it to recall that 4 years ago, President Obama has signed as his first legislation the Lilly Ledbetter Act to move to end discrimination against women in the workplace. We saluted Rosa DeLauro for paycheck fairness legislation, a place to take what man here wouldn't think that his wife, his daughter, his sister, his mother should receive equal pay for equal work in the workplace? Apparently, that does not apply to the Republican Congress. So instead of moving from President Kennedy said a small step to end a shameful and abominable practice of not paying women equally, we still do not have it on the agenda. It passed in the House, as you may know, when we had the majority. The Republicans held it up in the Senate, and so far, not much progress, but we are not going away. So this action yesterday, where the House Judiciary Committee approved the bill without any exceptions in the case of rape, incest, or protecting the health of the women, all the people who voted for the bill were men. Okay, so today on the floor we had the Defense Authorization Bill. 172 amendments are made in order. Only 6 amendments related to sexual assault, but none of them among the more critical and effective measures. They're about curriculum, and it's about this and that, and they're interesting and they're improvements, but they do not get to the heart of the matter. No Jackie Spears amendment, nothing to resemble what is necessary to get to the heart of the matter. How could they not put one of those amendments in order? They, instead, good amendments, little tweaks here and there that are important, but nothing essential and crucial to changing what is happening in the military. Republicans are saying no to members on both sides of the aisle concerned about sexual assault in the military, and on both sides of the aisle ready to vote for amendments to effectively and truly address this challenge. So it's an interesting time. We have a bill on the floor that could make a significant difference of the role of ending sexual assault of men and women in the military. We need a jobs bill. We have a need to do our budget. And yet, what are we doing? Amendments that again, are disrespectful of women. With that, I'll be pleased to take any questions you may.
The bill was passed by the House Judiciary Committee earlier.
Yeah.
Members who have proposed that bill have done that in the wake of this murder trial in Philadelphia. They argue that there really isn't much of a moral difference between what someone like Dr. Kermit Gosnell did to infants born at 23, 24, 25 weeks into pregnancy, and what can happen at a clinic down the road in Maryland where a doctor says that he'll perform elective abortions 28 weeks into pregnancy. So the question I have for you is, what is the moral difference between what Dr. Gosnell did to a baby born alive at 23 weeks and aborting her moments before birth? What's the difference?
You're probably enjoying that question a lot. I can see you savoring it. But let me just tell you this. Let me just tell you this. What was done in Philadelphia was reprehensible, and everybody condemned it. For them to decide to disrespect a judgment a woman makes about her reproductive health is reprehensible.
So
Next question. Next question.
You said any guy to say that question. What's the moral difference then between 26 weeks, elective abortion, and the killing of that same infant born alive? This is the issue that they're trying to talk to you.
This is not the issue. They are saying that there's no abortion. They want to make it a federal law that there be no abortion in our country. You're taking the extreme case. You're taking the extreme case. And what I'm saying to you is what happened in Philadelphia was reprehensible. And I do not think you use that. I'm not going to have this conversation with you because you obviously have an agenda. You're not interested in having an answer. But I responded to you to the extent that I'm going to respond to you because I want to tell you something. As a mother of 5 children, my oldest child is 6 years old the day I brought my 5th child home from the hospital. As a practicing and respectful Catholic, this is sacred ground to me when we talk about this. I don't think it should have anything to do with politics, and that's where you're taking it, and I'm not going there. Yes, sir.
Next Wednesday, there'll be a dedication, a final for a statue
Yes.
in the District of Columbia.
Isn't that great?
Douglas. How do you view...
I knew that was, what else would bring you to one of our... You used to come before Frederick Douglass.
I know. I'll try to make my appearances more varied, but for this, when will the day come? First of all, what does the statue mean? I've read some of the speaker's remarks which say it's a gift from the district. It took a long and tortuous path to actually get the statue placed, but it's only one. When will the day come when there will be 2 statues? And then when will there be the day where there will actually be not a lump of bronze, but actually a vote in the House?
I guess that depends on your effective activism, because so far you've made great progress. You've increased from nothing to something. We're very excited about Frederick Douglass's statue being unveiled in the Capitol. What you're saying is you want the District of Columbia to have the same right as every state, and I completely and entirely agree with you on that score. I think that if I were orchestrating it, and as you know, our member of Congress, Eleanor Holmes Norton, has been relentless and persistent. And from her committee that she serves on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, which has the jurisdiction over these public buildings and that, she has been an effective advocate, and that's why we have the statue we have today. I would just keep making suggestions of people to have statues here for. What I am pleased with is that in the past few years, and I take some credit for this, we've had just recently the statue to Rosa Parks. and a beautiful statue of her seated, I love that part, in the Capitol. And one of the first statues, a bust of an African-American woman, Sojourner Truth. I say this because one of the things I wanted to do when I became Speaker was to expand the diversity of statues that exist in the Capitol. Some we can do. Mostly they depend on the states making the change in a statue that they have here. But thank you for your relentless leadership on the subject, and I look forward to working with you for the next statue of a prominent member of the District of representative of the District of Columbia. But more important than that, now it may not seem more important, but more important to that, we want the representative of the District of Columbia to have a vote in the Congress of the United States. And of course, I myself support statehood. Time does not allow me to go into my history on this subject. My father was the chair of the District of Columbia Appropriations Committee when I was born, and he had been an advocate for home rule and more authority for the District of Columbia. And of course, as time has gone by, we want even much more than that. So I'm with you. I'll be willing to help Eleanor in any way possible, but understand how relentless she has been and effective. Yes, sir.
I believe just a few minutes ago at
Do we have anyone?
the Robert Mueller hearing for the House Judiciary Committee, he was talking about the PRISM program.
Yeah.
You were the top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee for many years during the time of 9/11, and he indicated had PRISM been in place prior to 9/11, they believed that they could have possibly intercepted one of the hijackers. Do you think that's possible with your understanding of the program and your point on the Intelligence Committee at that point?
Yeah, obviously I have not heard the director's testimony. It's just happened this morning. But certainly it would have improved the chances of doing that. I can't say with certainty that it would have, but it certainly would have improved the chance of, now he may have some specific evidence and connection that he was testifying about that I'm not aware of. But yeah, it did give more opportunity to surveil. I want a woman, yeah.
Lizzie, following up on that, at this point, do you think that Mr. Snowden should be prosecuted for leaking the information about the programs? And do you think that Americans, now that you've had more briefings, the dust has settled a little bit, we've heard testimony from General Alexander on dozens of at least a dozen plots being disrupted because of these programs. Should Americans be supportive of the government basically taking all of their cell phone data and looking at the servers of Internet companies?
Well, first of all, I do think that on 3 scores, that is leaking the Patriot Act, Section 215, FISA 702, and the President's Classified Cyber Operations Directive on the strength of leaking that, yes, that would be a prosecutable offense, and I think that he should be prosecuted. I think I don't agree with your characterization, and should the American people want all of their cell phone calls and data and all the rest surveilled, because that is not what either of these bills does, not the Patriot Act nor 702. I know this, the FISA Act. I'm going to have for my members, and I'm sure you will see it, a side-by-side of what the law was under President Bush and what the actions were under President Bush, what they had proposed in their Protect America Act, which was not acceptable to us, and what we passed in the FISA Act of 2008. And all of the protections that Jim Cole and others have said were abided by in going to a FISA court were insisted upon by the Democrats in that legislation. So there are many protections for the American people, including strengthening the Privacy and Civil Liberties Board. And I think this is really important because we have to have the balance between liberty and security. And liberty is very important to us, and privacy is essential to our liberty. So this board is very important, and I think we strengthened it in the 2008 bill, but I think obviously there's need to strengthen it further, A, and B, the congressional oversight has to be increased, and that can only be increased with more information being made available to Congress from whatever administration it is. The thwarting that is, was it the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, that he talked about, certainly I don't know the exact number, and I don't know the exact cases he's talking about, but I do know that there was a thwarting of some actions against the U.S. The American people were protected. But there's a lot of misinformation out there on this, and before everybody makes judgments about it, it's important to note what did actually, I mentioned 3 leaks that occurred, but what beyond that? Were there leaks just made to the public, which would be one thing? Is information being exchanged with other governments? I don't know that. People are charging that. I don't know that. A. B, how do we have a system that has so relied on the private sector and on contractors to make our security so vulnerable and so exposed that one person could go out and leak information that could be detrimental to our national security in the manner in which this was done? So again, we have to protect the American people. Laws have been passed to determine how that is done with great protection for civil liberties. And I was getting this ready for my colleagues because they want to know what they knew when. Well, some of them voted for it in 2008. But when the president says everybody knew, well, everybody didn't know all of the particulars. Maybe were exposed to it. The briefings were held, but everybody didn't have the fullest understanding of what the word surveillance means.
Returning for a second to the abortion issue.
I'm not going to. What else? What do you got? What do you got?
On this idea, Mr. Hoyer said that perhaps it might not be a bad idea for Congress to relook at 215, that section. It seemed after that bipartisan briefing you guys had a few days ago,
right,
that was a general consensus. What do you see as the next steps? I mean, will Congress use their legislative muscle here to possibly change these programs? And some even said declassify them more so the public has more awareness. Would you support that?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about declassifying. I have always been for much more declassification than we have. I think that keeping so many things classified, for what purpose? Is it in our national security to keep them declassified? Does it just invite more opportunities for people to convey information they shouldn't, and therefore a law is broken when it isn't even information that is that harmful? It's just to declassify. We always used to make a joke up in intelligence that would say, oh, you better read the Washington Post before they stamp it classified this morning, because they classified everything that came past them. And then once that happens, then you can't talk about it. So I thought far too much was classified, and even if it was justified at that moment, then in a short period of time, there should be much more declassification, which President Obama has been doing. We should always be revisiting. Technology demands that we look, what we're talking about now is something that could not have even been imagined a couple of decades ago. It was a big deal for us 20 years ago in intelligence. The biggest secret we had, one of the biggest secrets we had, was that we could detect faxes. Oh, don't let anybody ever know that we could detect faxes. You know, I'm talking internationally now. I'm not talking domestic, no domestic content, but internationally, because if they ever found that, they'd stop using faxes. And that was a big deal. It seems like the Stone Age compared to the volume of metadata that can be used. But I really seriously have some concerns about your characterization of should we be willing to allow them to do this, that, and the other thing. No, and that's not what the collection is about. American people saying they can have access to my records, to my data, to my information. That's not what this is about. Yes, sir.
You spoke before about private contractors
and
sharing
some
of this intelligence with foreign countries. Just to be specific, are you opposed to the volume or the blanket use of private contractors? And would you also be opposed to the government sharing some of this stuff with foreign governments, as has been alleged?
Well, I don't know if you're talking about the U.S. government sharing information with foreign governments in the interest of our mutual national security, I'm not opposed to that. I was saying if anybody acquired this information and made it known, for example, in this case, if they were sharing this information with a foreign government, that would be a wrong thing to do. You know, in terms of saying this is what the U.S.'s capability is, and we want you to see what their capability is. There's a great big, gigantic distinction there between how we have relationships with other countries in terms of sharing intelligence to protect our countries. I think there's a real question about the use of contractors to the extent that they are there without, you know, they work in the private sector, enormous profits to be made. Maybe we should bring some of that more in-house with employees of the federal government, with the oath of office that we take to protect and defend our country and that seriousness of purpose there. And maybe we need some private. I'm not saying we shouldn't have some private because that can facilitate our security. But let's take a measure of how much that is. I think that's a worthy question, how much intelligence that is in the hands of private sector. And don't you think that, I mean, of all questions, you know, let's just be completely removed from it. How on earth can we have a situation where we are so vulnerable, so exposed, with so much information about how we acquire intelligence, to the point that the head of the DNI is saying that it seriously hurts our national security? Is that what he said, words to that effect? How could we be said by one person walking out the door with access to so much information? I think that's a question that Congress has to ask, and that we have to make a judgment about. You asked about any laws to be changed about how these things are done. But all of these things, every step of the way, the Patriot Act, of which 215 is a part, we had the sunset of some of the more offensive aspects of the bill. We had the, and of course they have been extended, but we've had the Privacy and Civil Liberties Board in that bill much more strengthened. In FISA, if you saw all the routine that people have to go through. And I'll close by saying this. It's very important to note that we have said that FISA is the sole route that an administration can go. They have, I don't have any of that here, but they had wanted, the Bush administration had wanted, and I'm not making this a partisan thing, I'm just saying there was thinking at the time was that we don't need to go to a FISA court. We don't need a court. We can just unilaterally decide that we're going to surveil. And that was the fight that we had in 07 and 08, and that's why the 2008 FISA bill has as many protections built into it as it does. One more. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask about immigration?
Sure.
Because the bipartisan House group is still struggling to unveil any legislation, and some of the Republicans in the group continue to suggest that you're the holdup, and that you'd rather have the issue than the accomplishment. And I'm just wondering how you respond to that. And if Boehner decides to move bills in a piecemeal mode, do you think that could essentially end up with the kind of comprehensive package that you would want?
Well, let me say, first of all, that I disagree with the characterization that you put forth. We are working now just on them writing the language, Leg Council, whatever, to put it in legislative language, so that with the principles that they agreed to, that language, when translated to legislative language, is what everybody understood it to be. As you know, around here, going from principles to language, well, the angel is in the details, and I keep saying that because it's really important for us to have an immigration bill. I think that anybody who would say that I would rather have the issue than the bill just doesn't know what they're talking about. This is something that is so glorious for our country that we will have a bill, that many of us are willing to swallow some things we don't like about the bill, some terrible poison pills, but not deadly, and that will make progress on it. But I don't, you say that some of those Republicans are saying that. Maybe one of them, I don't know, but I think the other ones know that we're moving forward with the legislation, and they've worked very hard in good faith over time, and now they're putting it into language, and even one of the members who's not still a part of the group had an impact on the substance of the bill that is acceptable, is part of what is moving forward. I think it's really important not only for us to have a bill, but the House have a bill. The House have a bill. I wanted us to be first, as a matter of fact, but one thing and another, they couldn't reach agreement, and the Senate has moved ahead, and that's good too. So we would hope that this bill, because it is a consensus, it is, again, not a bill that I would have written. It is a compromise. And we never, any one of us, write a bill. It's always a consensus. This is a consensus times a compromise. And but it makes good progress.
What about the process?
Well, they've been working for years. They've been working for years.
A comprehensive bill like the Senate's doing, or perhaps doing it, chopping it up in pieces and going to conference. Do you think that would?
Well, I don't know. It depends. You have to see what it is. I mean, I think it's easier if you have, because they always, on all of these compromises, you always say nothing is agreed to until everything is agreed to, because you're making concessions. You're swallowing things that you don't really like, but they're worth it if the other part of the bill is there. So when you take it piecemeal, you might get the bad part without the good part, or depending on which side of you are of the issue, you might get your part and not their part, not your part. And the point is to protect our borders, which is our right, secure our borders, protect our workers, and that means not exploit people coming into our country. I would like to see unification of our families, so some consideration for how we do that, and path of citizenship for 11 million people in our country. Stop the taking action in that way. And you can say this to whomever is saying, I don't want a bill. Passing a bill stops the deportations immediately, by and large, if you don't have if you meet the criteria, if you don't have a criminal record or whatever, haven't violated the law in some other way than overstaying your visa or entering the country without full documentation. So, having all of it together as a vehicle, and then it's subjected to the committee process, it's subjected to the floor amendment process. That's Congress working its will. I would hope they would go that path. If they chop it up, what would be the view of it? It just depends on how they chop it up, as long as it has the component parts that can be joined together at the end. If that's a way to get there, we just want to get there. We just want to get there. And it's going to be a glorious thing, because it will be a step forward in terms of recognizing the dignity of every person in our country, and that immigration has been the constant reinvigoration of America, the determination and hope and optimism that families bring to make the future better for themselves is the spirit of America, a commitment to make the future better for every generation. So, I'm very excited about the prospect of a bill. I would myself, as I say, have concerns about this bill, but I'm willing to support it because in its component parts, it makes great progress. Would I have written it, would a Democratic bill have looked different? Yes, but that we're in a Republican House, and I think that over time, the eight, they don't call themselves a gang, it's a task force, they have acted in very good faith with very good consideration of lots of aspects of it, and recognizing that, there's an amendment process ahead. I think we're going to have to give up the room. But you quit.
About surveillance.
Yeah.
Do you think that the Justice Department or the FISA court should release the pleadings and the rulings on the government's interpretation of Section 215 so the public would have more confidence in the legal rationale for what's being done?
Are you saying either or?
Well, both.
Let me see what the request is. I mean, these things, you can never do things that are going to jeopardize sources and methods. We, again, protect and defend. That's our first responsibility. Privacy and security, liberty and security, that's a balance we must keep. But I don't want to say here that they should release something which I don't know what exposure it gives to sources and methods. Enlarging the issue, should we have more knowledge in the public, as the public should be more aware of what technology enables us to do? Yes. And people say, oh, they're saying that if our opponents knew that our capability, then, but they must know it. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but we don't have to necessarily confirm it. But we can take people down a path that science and technology enables us to do a lot more than you could do 20 years ago when I first went on the committee. But it is, again, I welcome the discussion. I think it's a healthy one for our country. I think that what I hear people saying in the news is so off base in terms of what is actually happening, but they don't know. And it's important for them to have more information to make better judgments, and also for public policy to be informed as to the, shall we say, threshold that the public needs to, will not go beyond in terms of the balance between liberty and security. So I'll look forward to continuing this conversation with you all in whatever detail you wish, but it's really important for me to know what I'm talking about, so I don't know what some of these things are that people have said and what has actually happened. The more we know, the more we can say about it. Thank you all.
Massachusetts.
Madam President, in less than 3 weeks, the interest rate on subsidized student loans will double if Congress fails to act. This is not only wrong, it is unnecessary. Senator Harkin and Senator Reid have proposed a plan to hold the interest rate steady at 3.4% for 2 years. This will give Congress time to develop a long-term plan to address the rising burden of student loan debt, a long-term plan that keeps interest rates low and that addresses rising college costs. Now, 2 weeks ago, a majority of senators in this body voted to approve this temporary extension to provide a measure of relief to our families. Unfortunately, Republicans have decided to filibuster this bill, blocking a measure that has majority support. That's not the way our democracy should work. I met with students in Massachusetts earlier this week. They told me we need to fix this problem. They said to me, don't double my rate. Don't double my rate. Dozens of Massachusetts universities have asked us to step in and to help their students. Petitions urging us to stop interest rates from doubling on July 1st have collected more than 1 million signatures. Students, parents, families are asking for help. They don't have time for politics. So, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that at a time to be determined by the majority leader, following consultation with the Republican leader, the Senate proceed immediately to consideration of calendar number 74S953, the Student Loan Affordability Act, and that the bill be read a third time. The Senate proceed to vote on passage of the bill, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Madam President.
Senator from North Carolina.
Madam President, reserving the right to object. My good friend and colleague from Massachusetts stated that students in Massachusetts had come up and said, Senator, fix the student loan program. Fix it. She said that what Republicans have done is filibustered it. The fact is that what Republicans offered was a fix. What the senator comes to the floor today to do is to have a 2-year extension of a student loan program that the Secretary of Education admits doesn't fix the problem. As a matter of fact, in an article in a Washington paper today, the Secretary of Education, Secretary Duncan, is very clear and implores the Senate and the Congress, fix it. Find a long-term solution. Let me state for my colleagues that what the senator from Massachusetts is here to do is to extend a preferred interest rate of 3.4% for 2 years on 39% of the student loans that are taken out. You see, current law is that for subsidized student loans, they're subsidized at 3.4%. And that preferred half or 50% cut is effective until the end of June. But under current law today, the unsubsidized Stafford loans are at 6.8%. The parent and graduate plus loans are at 7.9%. And my colleague's amendment only covers the subsidized Stafford loans that are 39% of all the loans that are administered. So what her proposal says is we're not going to fix it. We're going to kick the can down the road for 2 more years. And to the parents and to those that don't get subsidized Stafford loans, we're going to continue to charge you double what we charge other students. Now, let me just say, if you look at the math, where we are is unsustainable. Now, I understand that when we voted on a Republican alternative the last week, it was the Alexander Coburn-Burr bill, where we actually wanted to tie the interest rate on an annual basis to the rate of the 10-year Treasury bond. And the advantage was that if you locked that in any given year, that was your interest rate for the entire life of the loan. What students want is predictability. What they want to do is understand how much is it going to cost them for their education, not this year, but over the life of having to pay it off. Well, you know what? We put a proposal on the table, and it was routinely rejected, even though it was a solution. It was a fix. It was what the President's called for. It's what the Secretary of Education called for. The President also proposed a fix. The President's, I don't agree with all aspects of it, but it's a start. It's the nucleus of a compromise. And in the President's bill, he ties everything to the 10-year Treasury bond. Very similar to the fix that Republicans came up with. Here's the difference. The President ties subsidized loans to the Treasury price of the Treasury bill plus 0.93. Ours was 3.0. On unsubsidized Stafford loans, it was 10-year Treasury bill plus 2.93, almost identical to the Republican proposal. And for parents and graduates, the President's bill called for a 10-year bond rate and plus 3.93%. So if you do the math and you look at 60% of it not being subsidized and 40% being subsidized, what Republicans laid on the table and what the President laid on the table are very similar. As a matter of fact, both the Republican proposal and the President's proposal said, let's fix the rate for the life of the loan. So not only am I being asked today to agree to a unanimous consent request to take up a bill that doesn't fix the problem, I'm being asked to grant unanimous consent to a bill that doesn't even extend the same rate for the life of the loan for the students that are borrowing it. Now, imagine where we'd be in the marketplace if we wanted to buy a home, and when we walked in, our lender looked at us and said, I'm going to lend you the $300,000, but I've got a right to readjust the rate every year. Some people take a risk at doing that. They're called mortgages that are fixed with arms. They weren't very popular. As a matter of fact, many of those were the ones that were foreclosed on. Here's the challenge. We've got to present something that is understandable and that's predictable and something that is financially sustainable for the American people. Now, some have come to the floor and they've been brave enough to say that these bills actually produce a savings. Let me squash that. The Congressional Budget Office has come out and projects that direct student loans issued between 2013 and 2023 will cost $95 billion based upon a fair value basis, in contrast with a projected savings of $184 billion using questionable, fuzzy math. So make no mistake about it. There are no savings that can be claimed from any of the proposals that are out there. It is a cost to the American taxpayer, one that I think is a justifiable investment in education if we apply it to everybody. But this isn't applied to everybody. It's a unanimous consent request for 39% of the individuals that take out student loans. To the other 61%, it says, hey, you live with 6.8 or 7.9. So I'm not in a position today to agree to the unanimous consent request that's been made, but I am in a position to do this. I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of the bill that is at the desk, which the President of the United States proposal on student loan rate issue. I further ask that there be an hour of debate equally divided in the usual form, and at the expiration of time, the bill be read a third time and the Senate proceed to a vote on passage of the bill. And let's put this to bed now. Let's not wait till the end of June when we've used a couple of more weeks to say to kids, you ought to be concerned because rates are going to go up. Let's lock it down. I won't argue with the rates that the President set, even though I don't agree with it all.
Go back to his.
But it starts to fix the problem. It's a solution in the right direction, where just assuming that we extend what's currently broken, doesn't fix, and is not cost sustainable, I believe, is the wrong thing.
Is there an objection to the request for the senator from North Carolina?
Madam President,
Senator from Massachusetts.
reserving the right to object, I would like to focus on three words that the Senator Burr discussed here, and that is unsustainable, everybody, and fix. I heard all three, and I think all three are very important words here. So let's just go through this and figure out what it is that the senator is proposing and what it is we need to do. You know, right now we have a student loan program that produces $51 billion in profits this year off the backs of our students. $51 billion. And yes, Senator, I think that's unsustainable. We must find a way to deal with that. In fact, the Republicans did put a proposal on the table. Their proposal would have increased profits to the federal government from the student loan program by another $16 billion. So the Republicans' plan was to say, let's take a debt load that's already too difficult for students to deal with, and let's make it harder. That is, in my view, completely unsustainable. We've got to do better than that. Now, the question the senator also raises is one about everybody. We need to fix this problem for everybody, and I agree with the senator. We do indeed need to fix this problem for everybody. But let's think about what this is. What we're talking about here is about student interest rates that are about to double. And what the Democrats have proposed, what I proposed in the original request for a UC, is that we not let those interest rates double, and we use that time to try to develop a comprehensive way to deal with the rising costs of college and with the $1 trillion of college loan debt that is outstanding. In other words, we recognize this is a narrow slice. This is to prevent our students from facing a double interest rate, a doubling of their interest rates on July 1st. And we say we will use this time in order to get a comprehensive answer for all of our students. What the senator has proposed and what he has asked for unanimous consent on is not that. It is only a narrow slice of the question of how we're going to deal with interest rates on loans going forward. It doesn't deal with the interest, the loans outstanding, and it certainly doesn't deal with the rising costs of college. They want to put this problem to bed by saying that one problem we'll deal with and we'll move on. And let's keep in mind, we've seen what the Republican plan will do. The Republican plan will cost our students an additional $16 billion. That's the plan. Take a problem and make it worse, but not something that's sustainable and not something that fixes it for everyone. The third point he raised is he used the question of fix, and I think fix is exactly what we're talking about here. We have three different kinds of problems that we need to solve. We have the problem of $1 trillion of outstanding student loan debt that is crushing our students. We have the problem of rising student loan, rising costs for college. We must deal with this. And we have the immediate problem of interest rates about to double for our students. We can fix one of those problems in the next 2 weeks. We could fix it today. We could fix it by unanimous consent right now. And then we could agree to sit down on a bipartisan basis, and we could work together to try to solve the larger problems. That's what our students are asking for. That's what we need to do. One last point I want to make. I noticed that Senator Burr cites the Congressional Budget Office study. Let's just be clear what that same study he cited right from the